guys, it's Nikki here. I'm here today to do my spoiler-free review for the book Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is easily one of my absolute favorite classics, and it's one of my favorite romances. And although I'm sure almost everybody has at least heard of it, for those of you that haven't read it and are interested, I'm hoping this review will convince you to pick it up because I definitely think it's worth reading. This is a book I've read a number of times. This is a reread for me. The story itself follows Elizabeth Bennet and her sisters, although most focusing on Elizabeth and her interactions with some people who are new to her neighborhood. The book starts off by saying a single man with a fortune is in need of nothing more than a wife, and that kind of sets the tone for the whole book. It's a family of 5 daughters, all of whom need to be married off to men who are at least capable of supporting them because their property is entailed through the father's family, so it will not come to them. The main plot overall is Elizabeth and her development as a character and her kind of relationship with love and relationships with other people and how they kind of change as she grows. It's a book I really enjoy because of how much character development happens and how realistic this character development feels. So I do have likes and dislikes for this book. This time, however, because I like it so much, I don't really have as many dislikes for it. I have 2 dislikes and 3 likes this time around. I'll start with my likes as I normally do. The first being the characters. I love that they're diverse, I love that they're interesting, and I love that they develop realistically and well. Jane Austen is a very talented writer in this respect, and her characters feel very relatable. Even though there's social norm differences, I do relate very strongly to many of these characters because of how well written they are. My second like is the plot. Although it's not something I specifically have to deal with, I do enjoy the whole story of this woman's life and how her and her sisters kind of are on this rocky road towards marriage because that is what is expected of them, because they're women in a time where women were expected to marry and have kids and they didn't really get anything else for themselves. And the way this is written, you don't really feel bad for them that this is what is expected of them. Instead, you're just rooting for them because you want them to be happy. The third like I have for this is the effortless way with which the social norms of the time are written into the story. The really basic ones, it's just written as if it's expected that you know it, but it is still explained in such a way that you're never really left guessing what's going on. And anything more major that comes up is a point of discussion at some point between characters or in reflection from characters. And because of that, I really never felt like I was out of the loop with any of the social norms that were going on. My 2 negatives are pretty nitpicky. There's nothing major. One is pacing. It is a bit slow because it is very character driven, and a lot of the book is from a single perspective. And it's a mix of kind of observation, action, and reflection, and because of that, the pacing is a bit slower. Although I didn't feel it drag, it definitely wasn't action-packed, and unless you're a character-interested reader, this will feel very slow. The second dislike is really more of a warning than a dislike, and it's that because this is a classic, it's written in a language that is just different enough from what we read in modern novels and different enough from the way we talk that if you haven't read a lot of classics, it may be very hard for you to get into the book. And that's all I have for likes and dislikes. I'm gonna move on to some characters. There's 4 main characters I'm gonna kind of talk about briefly here. Elizabeth Bennet, Jane Bennet, Charles Bingley, and Fitzwilliam Darcy. Elizabeth Bennet is the person whose point of view we follow. She is the second oldest sister in a family of 5 girls, and she is very witty, very friendly. She cares deeply about the ones she loves. However, she is very judgmental. But because of these 4 traits combining, she is very interesting to follow in her perspective, which made the book a lot more interesting because of how she was written. She was just very relatable. Jane Bennet is the eldest sister. She's the closest to Lizzie. They're very close friends, as well as being the eldest 2 daughters. The thing I really liked about Jane was her personality was such a good contrast to Elizabeth, so it really put the two, really allowed the two characters to develop independently while still driving each other forward as well. With that, I will move to Charles Bingley. He's one of the new people that are moving into Netherfield, which is a local kind of manor house property. He's rich, and because of that, all of the single women in the area are falling all over themselves to him to get him to marry them, or it helps that he's amiable and friendly. And the only thing that kind of is a mark against him is how easily influenced he is by his friend Fitzwilliam Darcy, which I will use to transition into the character Fitzwilliam Darcy. He is very prideful, a smidge arrogant, but also awkward and shy. Something that I think male characters in novels from this time that really benefit from is that when their characters are like this, they're not considered shrewish or wallflowers, they're just considered brooding, which works for and against him in this case. The thing that I think that I like about him the most, to be honest, is the fact that he cares deeply about his friends and family, especially his sister. The relationship between the two of them that is presented in the novel is very touching considering the time period, and that other things I've read have said that kind of like familial connections weren't treated the same way, although I don't know if that's true or not, but it is a nice change of pace from other things that I have read from the same time period. Those are the only four I'm going to talk about independently. The other people I'm going to talk about are the other Netherfield guests. That's Charles's sisters and his brother-in-law. They're kind of what you typically think of when you think of London high society, and they act the way the stereotypical London high society acts, and they're a really good contrast to the other people that live in the area of Netherfield. Then there's the Bennet family. These are the three remaining sisters, and then Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, who are the parents of all five girls. The father's a pretty interesting character. He's probably like my third favorite in the family, and then the mom and the younger and the two younger sisters are probably a tie for my least favorite, with Mary, the middle sister, just kind of still being in the middle. She doesn't get as much screen time as the other gals. And the reason I mention them kind of this way is because I just want to mention that they have a pretty important role in terms of how the main characters develop and how their relationships move forward. That's all I have to say about the characters. They really just improve every time I read through this book, and I can't say enough how much I recommend this book, which leads me to my wrap up. For me, this book is 5 out of 5 stars easily. Like I said, it is my absolute favorite classic and one of my absolute favorite romance novels that I've ever read. It's sweet, it's touching, it has great characters, it has a great plot, and the character development is reasonable, it's realistic, and it's everything about the characters, including their development, is so relatable that I can't help but get attached to them all over again when I read this book. Any complaints I have are few and far between, and they are nitpicky more than actual dislikes that really impede my enjoyment of the novel. And the only thing I can really say is if you haven't read classics, I don't think this should be the first classic you read. However, it's not as difficult as other classics, so it's definitely one that you can pick up very quickly once you're comfortable with the writing style that you typically see in classic novels, especially classic novels written in around the same time period as Jane Austen's. And that's all I have to say for my spoiler-free review. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!